on this Tuesday afternoon. We are so excited to be hosting today's webinar in partnership with the Larta Institute, talking about all things SBIR. We hope that you all are able to pull all the information you need from it to be able to optimize what funding can look like and just learn a new way to possibly fund what you are building. If you just a few housekeeping things before we get started, because I want to make sure that they have the optimal amount of time to chat with you all today. Please make sure that you keep yourself on mute. Feel free to turn your camera on if you feel comfortable. Also, this is being recorded, so if there's anything that you miss, you'll be able to find it on the Amplify Louisville YouTube channel afterward. If you need to. Along the way, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will make sure that I am watching that, as well as our host here, our co-host here today. And then at the end, we'll open it up for questions if you would like to come off of mute and just ask something. But with that being said, I'm going to stop talking. Thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Gunjan, Tobias, and BreAnn. I wanted to make sure I got that right. I'm going to turn it over to you all. I will be here if you need me, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to share with us today.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to share my screen. I haven't used Zoom in a while, so if something goes wrong, let me know. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So let me open up here. So thank you everyone for showing up on this Tuesday afternoon. Actually, when you said Tuesday, I was like, oh, it's only Tuesday. It's a little hard to keep track of the days. But thank you so much for showing up. I know that the mornings can sometimes be hard, but we're super excited to have this workshop with you today on the sort of SBIR and STTR world that you might be a little bit familiar with or not. Hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll be a lot more familiar with the pipeline and the structures within that world of funding. The agenda is looking at, we're going to do a little bit of an introductions on our side, just introducing who we are. We're going to do a brief overview of the SBIR, STTR, as well as the federal agencies that operate under it. And then we'll go into sort of the core part of this workshop where we'll share some tips and advices on SBIR and STTR tips. There are technical, administrative, and commercial, which are really the three pillars that go under the SBIR, STTR funding. Then we're going to segue into sort of how to think about commercialization through these phases that Gunjan and BreAnn will explain to you, from phase 0 all the way to phase 3 and going beyond those phases. And then we're going to sort of end on identifying the right opportunities, sort of where to go from here. What are the next steps that you can do? We're going to do a little bit of recap. We're going to have a Q&A, and then we're going to share the presentation we can share with you guys. We'll have some resources in the appendix that are some webinars, some additional resources to sort of take you through the next steps after this presentation. I'll start with the introductions. My name is Tobias Warntoft. I'm a program manager here at Larta. If you're not sure what Larta is, we do have a slide on what we are, so we'll get to that a little bit later. I've been at Larta for about 2.5 years, sort of working on the operational side. With me today, I have two incredible advisors in our network. We have Gunjan Siroya and we have BreAnn Brown. I think both of them have worked in sort of the SBIR, STTR world for more than a decade now. They have helped startups with commercialization and technical support. I think they have supported over 300 companies with Larta at this point in time. They have worked across multiple agencies. I'll have them introduce themselves so they can speak a little bit more personal to who they are and why they're sort of a credible speaker for today's workshop. So I'll hand it over to Gunjan Siroya first to introduce himself.
Thank you, Tobias. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gunjan Siroya. My background is over 30 years in the business of technology. I've worn many hats from managing, profit and loss for business units, for Fortune 500 companies, to actually having my first startup in 2000. I'm a part of a couple of startups, and as Tobias mentioned, that I've helped over 200 plus companies in their commercialization journeys. Most of them were in the SBIR, STTR space, some international organizations as well. And a bulk of them were either in the phase 1 or in their phase 2 journey as well. So, and I, within Larta, not only am I a principal advisor, but I also have other responsibilities. So I wear multiple hats at Larta. BreAnn, over to you.
Thank you, Gunjan. So my name's BreAnn Brown. I've been working with Larta for a little over 6 years, supporting companies with SBIR grants across multiple agencies. I actually got started with Larta because about 10 years ago, I received an SBIR phase 1 and phase 2. So I was a grantee and had the opportunity to go through one of Larta's programs. And then after that cycle, I sold out of my ownership of the tech startup I was working in. And I was approached by Larta about becoming a mentor. So I'm here today because I've had the opportunity to both work with companies, work with tech startups, and then as well as actually being a grantee through the SBIR program. So I can kind of speak to both sides of that. Really excited to talk to you guys today.
Thank you both for the introductions. Before we go into the next slide, I just want to encourage everyone, we don't want it to be a presentation where, we do all the slides and then you guys have the questions at the end. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat if you're not comfortable unmuting. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. Obviously, we don't want to talk over other people, but, if BreAnn finishes a sentence and you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. I think Zoom also have a raise your hand button, but I'm not sure if I'm equipped to find it. But if you know how to raise your hand on Zoom, feel free to do it and I can sort of jump in. So, any questions, just put them in the chat or unmute yourself and we'll do that. But without further ado, I won't do any more talking as well. I'll just hand it over to Gunjan and BreAnn to start these slides. And we'll start with a brief overview.
Thank you, Tobias. Next slide. So SBIR, STTR, I'm assuming that you know what they are. Just a 30-second overview. The federal government over the last many decades have been funding annually by providing a certain amount of funds to certain agencies within the federal government focused on small business innovation or technical research. And as part of that, each of these sub-agencies then manage as per the guidelines of the Small Business Administration the disbursement of funds that is structured in a particular fashion. These are all of the agencies that typically provide funding on an annual basis. And Larta, as an entity, and I'm going to talk about that, has worked with almost all of them. We're going to cover a little bit of history about what we do with these agencies and how we work with them. Next slide. So typically, SBIR, STTR starts with a phase 0. In the graphic that you see right ahead of you, when you're in the process of applying for an SBIR or an STTR award, you are actually in phase 0. In this phase, you have an idea, and you were trying to figure out what that idea can do, what problems would it solve, what could be the general value proposition, what would be the technical effort, at a very high level, right? And so you put an application together, which is a few pages long. Some agencies have 3, some have 5, and it contains your technical plan for phase 1. The idea itself, what is the problem you're going to solve, what is the potential solution looking like, and what would be the market that you're going to address. Once you win the award based on an extensive review by the SBIR agency, you actually now are officially into phase 1. This typically lasts for 6 to 12 months, and this is where what we call, or the government also calls, as the proof of concept stage. This is where you're actually trying to, you're actually doing a lot of research, trying to understand what are the challenges, maybe doing what we call as customer discovery, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You're doing your R&D translation work here to start. At this stage, you also build a commercialization roadmap of what you're going to do with this innovation and how you're going to bring it to market. And the importance of that is because SBA's or the SBIR, STTR requirement is that any innovation they fund, it is with the intent that it will have a commercial value. You're going to create intellectual property. You're going to actually commercialize this technology, which in turn will create jobs, which will build on entrepreneurship if you are a first-time entrepreneur, and so on and so forth. Once you are done with your phase one, you are given a timeline when you apply for phase two. The phase two is typically 24 months. Sometimes it's extended by companies. And in there, you actually develop your technology, whether it's chemistry, whether it's biology, whether it's data, whether it's hardware and sensors. It could be anything, depending on the topic. And that's where you do the prototype and maybe even do the validation as well. This is where you also then start to create plans out of your commercialization strategy, and start planning for business development, start planning for raising additional capital to take you beyond phase two. And then the last terminology is phase three, which is post SBIR, STTR. This is where you actually start to fully deploy your commercialization strategies and plans into action. Let me pause here and see if BreAnn, you would like to jump in and if you have any thoughts here.
Sure. Yeah. One thing I just like to mention, and something that Gunjan and I have seen with most of our companies, is not everyone's going to be fitting into one of these boxes. So it's okay if you are applying, if you're technically by these definitions in phase 0, but maybe you also have some revenue, or maybe you're in phase 1, but you have already started prototyping. That's okay too. So these are some generalized boxes. But if you're feeling like you're not fitting in one of them, that's okay. You don't have to fit into these boxes. They're just a good frame of reference.
Great point, BreAnn. Thank you. Next slide. So a little bit about Larta. Larta is a 30-year-old organization. The history of Larta is we started as what we call as Los Angeles Regional Technology Assistance Program. And this was really funded by the LA County, Los Angeles County here, at a time when the defense industry was dying. All of the defense companies were moving out, and there was a huge amount of technical capability in this region, but there was no opportunity other than to consider bringing your own ideas together and starting up with your own startups. The funding was provided to Larta as a nonprofit. We started as a nonprofit, and we are very much a nonprofit for the last 30 years. So it's a 501c3 designation. Over that period, we did well. And the state of California recognized us and said, hey, what you're doing here, acceleration and incubation of startups, we'd like to do that statewide. Can you help us with that? So Larta then started supporting the entire state back in 1998. In 2003, Larta was invited by National Institute of Health to actually build up an accelerator program for the very first time in the SBIR, STTR space. And so we took upon that challenge and built a national level program for NIH as one of the first agencies. And that was successfully deployed, helping companies that were in phase 2 to receive commercialization expertise. Looking at the success of that program, NSF got interested and said, hey, we'd like to take your help and build something for phase 1. Can you help us do that? And so this is where Larta built another program that is meant for companies that are in the phase 1 of their life cycle, helping them build their commercialization strategy and go-to-market plans. With that, USDA said, hey, we'd like to have a program too. And so we built another program for USDA that was followed by NOAA, NIST, and DOE as well. So over these years, over the last 20 years of our journey, we have helped these agencies. And the way we have built that, we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, because this is important for you. But to describe Larta once again, our mission is to really foster science and innovation and technology innovation for a sustainable planet. we realized that we've been focusing a lot and we have a lot of strengths and capability. So we built on that in focusing around ag and food, clean tech and energy, bioscience and healthcare, marine and oceans, education and community. It does not mean that we don't support other areas. We absolutely do. But these are the areas that we are building a focus on more and more over the last several years. What has been the impact? Since 1993, we have helped over 4,500 startups. I think the number is probably close to 5,000 today. Over 6,875 science and technologies commercialized. The total capital raise that we have helped with is close to over $7 billion, with 196 companies that have been acquired, 25 have gone IPO. And this is basically with limited data that we have access to. Probably these numbers are much bigger, but we cannot stake a claim till we validate that. So these are just a conservative number. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Why don't I pass on to BreAnn, take a break here and see if BreAnn, you'd like to take this up, run by your thoughts and your experiences to start with and what your advice is for the team here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gunjan. So as we were putting together this webinar, we thought it might be helpful to give you guys some technical tips that you could utilize, well, a variety of different kinds of tips that you could utilize as you're going through the SBIR application process. So one of the first things that we would recommend doing is familiarizing yourself with the SBIR and STTR federal agencies. So these different agencies, we had the slide a little while ago. There's DOE, USDA, NOAA, NASA, NIST, NSF, NIH. There's a variety of them. Try looking through those different agencies and what kind of focus areas they have. So as you're seeing different, oh, sorry, just one second. So as you're seeing different, as you're looking at your technology, some technologies might be a great fit for DOE, some might be a better fit for USDA, some might be a good fit for NASA or NOAA. So reach out to those agency project managers. Each agency has a variety of project managers, and you can ask them, tell them what kind of technology you're looking at, and ask them where they feel like you should apply. Identify the problems and the aims that each agency has, and formulate your own vision as to which technologies would be the best fit for which agencies. Gunjan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can take on. Yeah. So I think what BreAnn, to add to what you're saying is each agency has subtopic areas. I'll give you an example of USDA where they can be 10 or more, and they are broken down by biology, by high-tech and technology, by forestry, by rural development, and others. Similarly, NSF would have many topics, and so would NIH, and so on and so forth. Within each of those, then you have to look at what is the applicability of the innovation that you're developing. And so formulate the vision around how exactly does it match to that topic, to the mission of the agency, and to the problems that you're identifying as well. It has to be very clear. If these things are not clear, you probably not even will make out of the gate in the case of NSF, which has a gating factor to say you do a pre-submission executive summary, and they will then decide whether to invite you to apply or not. In the case of USDA, DOE, NIH, and others, they don't have the gating factor, but certainly, if you're going to put in the effort to propose to seek funding, you certainly want to make sure that these are the most important things that you want to keep and align yourself with. You also want to look at, is it going to be a new concept, or are you going to enhance something that you have developed in the past or you have ready to go in the market as well? There is no restriction on enhancing, but depending on whether it's a new concept or you're going to enhance something, you could actually be looking at a particular agency. So as an example, if you have a new concept, which is what we call as, in certain terms, is called the moonshot. If you have something very high risk, high reward kind of innovation, you have something which is never done before or something very unique, look at NSF, because they are the ones that typically want to take a bet on you on those innovations that have not been done. On the other hand, if you have a biological, or if you have a pharmaceutical technology, or if you have a medical device or a healthcare IT, you could look at NSF, but if you have an existing solution and you're building on that with the next generation of your innovation, look at NIH, because they can actually take you deeper and it's very specific to that sub-agency within NIH itself. So depending on, again, the innovation and where you are in the journey of that innovation, of that life cycle, you should make the determination. Also define the use case. As you put your phase 1 application together, be sure you define your use case. But if you're looking at phase 2, so that means you've applied for phase 1, you got it, now you're going to apply for phase 2, the ability to narrowly define the use case becomes very, very critical and very important for you in winning the phase 2. So define the use case narrowly to say exactly what is the problem you're trying to solve, and then put your solution together, package your solution together to say, how will you solve it? And what would be the value, right? And so those are some of the things that you really want to put it together in your technical.
And to add to that, go ahead. Sorry. To add to that as well, you may have a technology that has a variety of potential uses. In fact, a lot of the companies that we work with, we see that. And so as you're looking through these different agencies, which agency you apply for might be dependent on what kind of application you want to use as your beachhead market, or what kind of use case you would like to be your beachhead. For instance, I have a client that's got a hyperspectral technology that can be used in a huge variety of ways. So they started out with NOAA utilizing this technology in shellfish. Now they're actually doing a project with USDA for meat and poultry. They're also looking at applications within oil and gas, which may be a DOE application. So it could be, as Gunjan mentioned, new concepts and enhancing existing solutions. Their first one was a new concept, but they can also take this existing technology and enhance it for additional use cases, which then give them opportunities to apply for additional grants with different agencies, not for the same technology, but for a new application of the existing technology, if that makes sense. So as you're looking at these different agencies, there's really a huge variety of options and opportunities, and you want to focus on the problems and aims of the agency you're looking at to make sure that your technology is a good fit for what their funding goals are.
And for some of you, there are companies that are actively working with Larta and are based out of Louisville, Kentucky, as an example, and even others. And regularly what we do is, as principal advisors, and Larta has over 125 plus principal advisors and expert advisors. We the 125 plus principal advisors see this all the time, that there are technologies or innovations that have the ability, technical ability, to be cross-purposed across multiple use cases. And our principal advisors on a regular basis recommend ideas, suggestions, and even show them the pathway so that you can use that as a funding source to start with. But more importantly is enable you to build what we call as the platform. If you build in the first innovation and then you layer it on top with other use cases and applications that you can support, you can structure your innovation to be a platform technology that can go across use cases, across industries. And that is huge because it increases the chances of your success in being able to innovate and being able to commercialize success. Next slide. The second part is the SBIR STTR administrative clearance. And here, there are several things that you need to look at. Earlier, we are using the term SAMS. SAMS used to be the earlier term. Now it's UEI. And that is a number you need to have. You need to be registered within the federal government and make sure that you have all of that data put in place. This can take typically from 1 month to 3 months. And so you want to be ahead if you have never applied to the federal government for grants. With that, once you have that, then your understanding of the templates, I think, would be critical here. There is a ton of resources provided by each and every SBIR, STTR agency. And I'm going to repeat, there are a ton of resources provided. And when you start looking at that, if you've never applied before, for many people, we have heard back saying it's overwhelming. Can you help me? I'm lost. And for you, that some of you that have applied in the past, I think just make sure that you're tracking the changes, because even though the federal government does not change that often, but there are certain things they constantly change. And if you're not tracking that, there is a good chance your proposal may get rejected. So you want to be on top of every single thing that they mention, because remember, you're putting in a lot of effort. And if you're not going to get selected because of administrative reasons, that's not going to be a good feeling on anybody's part. So I think the emphasis is understand whether you're a repeat applicant or a first-time applicant. Understand the requirements, understand the templates, so that you can fill that out appropriately. I know you've done this before, BreAnn. So what are your thoughts and what's your experience like? What do you recommend everybody?
So I have probably 3 recommendations. The first one, I would definitely recommend, especially if it's your first time, that you give yourself lots of time, probably more time than you think. We do have clients who've done it a lot of times before, and they turn these around really quickly, but I would recommend giving yourself like a few months, because you want to make sure that you have time to get letters of support. That's something that we'll be talking about, but also that if you have questions, that you have the time to reach out, which is my second tip. Feel free to reach out to us at Larta. Feel free to reach out to the different agencies that you're working with if you have questions. I know this was something that I wish I would have known earlier in my experience with the agencies. They love it when you reach out. They're not sad about it at all. It doesn't look poorly on you. They don't count it against you. They want you to ask questions, and they're happy to help. So if, as you're looking through the application, you have a question about the budget narrative or how to attach the letters of support or any of these forms, reach out and ask them. They will definitely help you. And then the third thing is letters of support. Make sure that you're getting a good letter of support, and that you give yourself time for that, because even if someone tells you they'll write you a letter of support, they don't always turn it around very quickly. Often you have to kind of pester them a little bit. And the last thing I would say, actually, so I guess I have 4, is with internal accounting and budgets. Some of you may be a going concern. You already have an existing accounting system, so this is really simple for you. And some of you may have never even thought about this before. So give yourself time on that, but also know that if at some point during the cycle of your grant, so if 1 month into your grant, you've realized that you need to change something about the way you did the budget, you actually can do that. So you can contact the agency, let them know what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish, and they usually will approve it. So they do have to approve it, but they're very nice about approving it. They're very flexible. They understand that as you're writing these grant applications, you don't have a crystal ball. So things are likely going to change, and they are very supportive of that. So that was another thing that I wish that I had known. Trying to make a budget work that didn't make sense for like 1.5 years before I realized I could have just asked at the very beginning and had them let me fix it. So ask questions. Don't be afraid that anyone will look badly on you. They don't. So those are my big tips.
Well, thank you. Now, one of the things that folks who are seeing this or listening to us talk here is we didn't talk about what kind of funding does agencies provide. It varies by agency. So for those who have not applied or do not have an idea about SBIR, you're new to this whole SBIR, STTR world. Phase 1 could be typically in the range of 100 to less than 300,000. There's always an upper limit, but it depends on the agency. It depends on even the topic sometimes. And then phase 2 can range from $500,000 going up all the way to 1.4, $1.5 million. And that's for 2 years, as we mentioned earlier, that you can use that funding for. In addition to that, phase 1 and phase 2, most agencies, but not all agencies, will provide some additional amount of funding to help you develop the commercialization plans. Commercialization plans are very important. When you apply for phase 1, it's a high-level summary, but when you apply for phase 2, you have to submit a very detailed commercialization strategy and go-to-market plan. And when you are in phase 2, almost all agencies will require you to have a commercialization portion or component, because once again, as I mentioned earlier, the key purpose of SBIR, STTR is to help develop commercializable technologies and innovations. And so keep that in mind as you go through this process, and make sure that you're working towards the goals of raising these funds that are non-dilutive in nature, but it allows you with the ability to be prepared. Most of the SBIR agencies may have. Let me backtrack here. Some larger SBIR agencies have multiple awards that they give in a calendar year, but some of the medium and smaller ones may have only once a year application date. So as BreAnn said, start early, give yourself time, because if you don't do everything right and if you don't complete it on time, you'll have to wait another year before you apply for your SBIR or STTR. Now, last bullet point here was TABA requirements. So TABA is something, TABA is really a technical and business assistant. That's a terminology that the federal government in the SBIR world, STTR world use to provide additional funding towards your commercialization goals of the innovation that was funded by that agency. A little history around that. So based on the gold standard that Larta set up with the commercialization support for all of the different agencies that we have worked in the past, the Department of Commerce, the Secretary of Commerce, invited Larta's CEO to be part of a team that they formed within the federal government to help them create the next generation of commercialization support for SBIR, STTR world. They said, we are putting in $4.5 billion a year. How can we make sure, how can we enable much more the ability of innovators and innovations to be commercialized? So our CEO, along with 4 others, spent a year together in that committee. And what came up was today what we call as the TABA, which is the Technical and Business Assistance, which is an add-on program to the SBIR, STTR program itself that recommends, provides additional benefits to innovators such as yourself to help with their commercialization strategies and go-to-market. Next slide. You want to take that, BreAnn? And I'll jump in and back you. Yeah.
Yeah. So as Gunjan mentioned, for each of the applications for phase 1 and phase 2, there's usually some degree of a commercialization plan that you're supposed to complete. And if you think about it, this really makes sense. So I like to think of the different government agencies as investors in your technology. So they want to know that if they're going to invest in this technology, it's not going to die. They don't want to invest in something that's not going to be successful. So they want to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve, who has the problem, how big is the market. If you have a precision ag technology, for instance, how big is the precision ag market? They want to know how many customers you're likely to have, who that customer is, who's going to buy it. It could be the end user, of course, but it could also be like government agencies are going to buy it. And they want to know what makes your technology better, the value proposition. Are there competitors in the field? If so, what makes you different? What makes it so that you're going to be able to capitalize on the market size? So these are really all things that the different agencies want to know so that they can go back to Congress and say, look, we invested in this technology. They were able to be successful. We were able to create jobs, improve tax revenue, and increase tax bases. So think of the government as an investor in your technology and what kinds of things might an investor want to know. That's I think, a good way to look at it. They want to know all of these things that we've mentioned here on the slide: your market size, who the customer is, the value proposition, your competitors, how you're going to go to market. These are all elements of a good commercialization strategy for your phase 1 going into phase 2. Do you have anything to add, Gunjan?
No, I think, yeah, I mean, these are tips for phase 1. In phase 2, you would have to enumerate, you need to explain and define very clearly all of these and more. In your phase 2, you will also need to define what is your pro forma profit and loss statement going to look like. That means, what is your forecasted sales? Where is it going to come from? How many units? What is the price you're thinking about? If it is sold as per units, or if it's it's a commodity, if it's a transaction based, whatever the model may be, what is the revenue model? What is the sales model going to be? Are you going to sell directly, indirectly? Who is it that you're going to partner with? Are you going to license it? So there's a lot that needs to go in. And as I said earlier, and I'm going to quantify this again, when you apply for phase 2, 1/3 of the decision is based on your commercialization. So such is the importance and the weightage they give as you go through your journey in developing your innovation. And when you reach towards the application for phase 2, you need much more than what's been shared out here for phase 1. Today, I think in this conversation, we are assuming we have people who are planning to apply for phase 1, some who are planning to apply phase 2, so we're trying to cover all of that together. But happy to answer any questions.
And we also have, I think on the next slide, we have the phase 2 requirements as well. And just so you know, if you want to apply directly for phase 2, some agencies do allow that. So if you want to go straight to phase 2, you can do that in some cases as well. Next slide, please. But this seems like a good segue to go into the phase 2.
I jumped the gun there, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, BreAnn.
No, you're good.
No, so I think, as I was saying, right, you need to have revenue model, you need to have forecasts on what your revenue will look like, you need to have intellectual property plans clearly defined. You need to also define what resources you have, what are the gaps, how are you going to fill the gaps, what the roadmap looks like. You need to provide clear definition of the value proposition. You're building this innovation, whatever it may be. Why would your customers care to pay you? What is the value they're going to see? And how does it map out in their current scenario, the customer scenario? Because they might be using something and you're replacing that. You might be solving a problem, you might be providing them some kind of a benefit again. How would that work out for them, right? And these are some of the important things that actually go in the development of your innovation, in the technical part of your innovation. Because if you don't understand these things, if you don't capture these things in your product development lifecycle or innovation development lifecycle, there is a high chance, usually, where your innovation will not be able to reach the market because it does not either provide the value to the market or it doesn't address the needs of the market the way they would like to get this innovation in their hands. And so I think these are all important and relevant things that we just be looking at.
And I think Gunjan makes a really good point. We occasionally, I should say, get pushback from clients who are really early stage, who may be nowhere near actually going to market with their product, and so they are concerned. Why do I need to look at these things now? I'm not ready to sell. I'm not exactly sure that the technology works. Some of you might be in this boat where your phase 1 is actually feasibility, and you don't know exactly what it's going to do, and so it's kind of hard to identify and quantify some of these elements. But the earlier you begin this process, the more effective you're going to be, the more successful you're going to be. We've seen this over and over and over again with the companies we've worked with. The more aware you are of your market and the challenges they face, the better you're going to be at R&D. So no matter what stage of development your technology is at, this is super important to start. And that is really why the government wants you to start looking at this much earlier than, okay, now I'm ready to sell. Who is my customer? We want to make sure that from the very beginning. And I think we can go to the next slide.
All right, next slide. Yep. So I think quickly, in the interest of time, we'll just go quickly here. So how do you think of commercialization, and why are we talking about that so much? Because again, we talked about a terminology called customer discovery. This really starts when you get into your phase one, and maybe even sometimes earlier into your phase zero stage itself, where you need to understand really who your customer is. What is the current way in which they're solving the problem? A particular could be related to treating patients with a certain drug for a certain indication. It could be engineering solution, it could be a AI solution, it could be something else, right? So really understanding that what do they do and what can you change comes later, because once you understand the problem, you can then understand how to solve it as well in a much better way. You certainly, all of you, most of you, some of you are experts in your technical fields, but relating that to what the market that you're going to sell into and who's going to be your customer becomes very important in helping you define your innovation side. Commercialization could also mean pilot testing, going through a regulatory process. It is certainly raising capital, whether it's dilutive, non-dilutive, depending on what your needs are, hiring the right team. Do I need a board of advisor? Do I need to have a board of director? When do I do it? Who would there be? What kind of employees? What kind of roles do I need to fill in? What can I do myself? And so on. Are you going to sell? Who are going to be your partners? Are you going to license something? And then how are you going to protect your IP? Not everything requires IP protection, to be honest. In fact, these days, more and more people are saying, hey, I don't want to spend time, money, and resources just trying to protect IP, only to actually publish something, prosecute my IP, publish something, and now let the world be there to see it and copy it and replicate it. And I don't have the wherewithal to fight back. So it is about thinking through that process to say what makes sense. And last but not the least, commercialization is about leveraging ecosystems that you have access to. Amplify, Louisville is one of them, certainly. Larta, we ourselves believe that we want to be ecosystem partners to innovators. And to support that, not only do we have a team of 125 plus principal advisor and expert advisors that cover technology, industry vertical, domain, business functions, but we also have an ecosystem of investors, foundations, nonprofits, universities, researchers, government, corporate, so on and so forth, right? Our whole ecosystem, if you go on our website, you will see what they are, what they look like. And we work with them very closely to support innovators such as this. Next slide. So briefly going over the commercialization function model, a little bit of emphasis on what we do best, and we like to share some of that as well. The commercialization or commercial function model in any entity, typical entity or organization will have, starting from the top right, product and service development, R&D, engineering, etc. Then you have procurement and logistics. As you evolve and grow, you will have that function clearly identified. You will have an enterprise support function such as IT, finance, HR, and others. You also have marketing and sales. And lastly, you'll have the corporate, the strategic management part, the CEO, the management team, the CEO, and so on and so forth. Now, you don't need all of these on day one as a startup, but as you evolve and grow, this is what the commercial function model will look like. Next slide. Next slide. So again, what I like to highlight is, what we like to highlight is identifying the right opportunity. Your innovation needs to have an ecosystem. And so when you're starting out, or if you're already in that journey, our recommendation is to try and evolve and build your ecosystem. Connect, get access to resources, leverage your resources. And then lastly, most, if not all, startup companies will need some funding, whether dilutive or non-dilutive. Unless you're, already got a huge amount of cash, or you have a well-wisher that can give you that cash, that's great. But again, the funding is required. That doesn't take away from the need for the funding. And what Larta believes in is to be able to, ensure that the companies are successful with our 20 years of experience in the SBIR STTR space, but even outside of that, we have built that ecosystem as well, so that we can enable and help the companies with the connection resources funding in their phase 1, phase 2, and beyond phase 2, more importantly, in that journey. Next slide. Right, so we'll do a recap. BreAnn, would you like to take that?
Sure. Yeah, so just to recap, we would like to encourage you to start as early as possible. Go ahead and make sure that you review the different agencies and what their project priorities and goals are. Think of the government like an investor, and what kinds of things might you need to know for an investor. Find the right partners. I think that's something that we talked about a little bit today, but I can't stress enough the value of having a strong network that you're a part of. I think we see this every day. I'll have a client with a specific issue that crops up that I've never seen before, and I can reach out to Gunjan. I can reach out to one of the other experts in our network and find the answer right away. There's just nothing that replaces a strong network. So definitely encourage you to reach out to Larta, reach out to Amplify, strengthen those networks. I think we have a question here. Oh, so do you have any insights on the matching grants available from Kentucky State?
I think that's one question. Maybe Kiana, you would like to answer that.
I do not have that information right on hand, but I am happy to find it and find resources for you. I'm not sure how to say your name, Vivek. So I will put my email in the chat, and please connect with me on this so I can make sure that I get you the information that you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat itself. We'll be happy to answer those for you as best as we can. So there's another question here from Rob Mays, and the question is for NIH. My original application got an impact score of 52. My resubmission got a 42. I'm waiting on summary statement, but it is out of funding window. What should I do next? I think one of the best things you could do always, doesn't matter what the issue is to stay in touch with your program manager. And let your program manager at that agency, in this case, Rob, for you, it'll be the NIH program manager. And the program manager in the case of NIH would be part of a sub-agency, such as National Cancer Institute, NIDDK, NIMNH, and others. There are a lot of these 4-letter, 3-letter, 5-letter acronyms they have. But each will have program managers, multiple of them, and you would be assigned one when you apply for a funding. If you don't know who they are, look them up on the SBIR, STTR page on that for that agency. My suggestion would be continue down the path, because certainly 42 score is a better score. It could give you a chance. But then, there are certain procedures, processes that all agencies follow, that even if you have a good score, you may or may not get funded. There's always that small chance, but I think it looks like you should just follow up with them, because they can provide you with what's happening, what's the process, what's the likelihood, without giving you commitments, obviously. And they will also probably give you an estimated timeline based on the resources, some of the challenges they might be having with amount of funding, and so on and so forth. Hopefully, I know I've not given you a direct answer, Rob, but in this case, it's so unique. I think you're best served by reaching out to that program manager at home.
And I think that Gunjan's advice is really good for any of you. So even if you haven't applied yet, you can actually go, like, for instance, the USDA has different areas that they have focuses, and you can look at one of those focus areas, find out who the program manager is for the focus area where you think your technology is applicable, reach out to that program manager even before you apply and say, here's my technology, would this be a good fit? Do you think I should apply? And they can give you additional insights into, hey, yes, this is actually a huge priority, or that's kind of a priority, but we'd like you to find a partner in this area or this space that would make your case even stronger. The program managers are really supportive and want to help. So I think it's good advice for Rob, but I think it's good advice for anyone, no matter where you're at along this process.
And one last thing, Rob, just to add, because as you know, the federal government's financial year starts in October, ends in September. So it could be that overlap of financial year that takes you away from the previous funding cycle, where you may have grade score of 42, but now the federal government is has started a new federal financial year, and as such, the funding may then be applied for the new financial year as part of your award. So I think there are certain issues and those challenges that you have to understand probably, and your program manager may be in a good position to probably guide you through.
So Rob also has an additional question, Gunjan, that I think you might be better able to ask. I don't work with NIH, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the next question Rob is asking is, can your firm help us write a clinical trial aims for NIH? The answer is one of our experts that certainly can help you do that. That's certainly possible.
Thank you for those questions. Do we have any last final questions before we wrap up? And for the record, I will make sure that in the follow-up you have all of all of the information for you to reach out to the Larta Institute. So make sure that you keep an eye out for the follow-up email so that you'll have our information at Amplify Louisville, their information as well, so that you can easily reach out either via their website, LinkedIn, various avenues and channels if you need help or if you have additional questions that come up after this throughout your journey. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Oh, Gunjan, what's your email for follow-up?
I can post it here, absolutely, yes.
Awesome. Well, this has been phenomenal. You all have given us really, really, really great information and things to think about, as well as resources. Gunjan just put his email in the chat. So if you want to reach out and follow up, you can grab it there, but it will also, so at Amplify, we do not help subside the cost of applying. But if you need resources with that process, then that is something that we will be able to help you with. So unfortunately, but also we can do some research and see if there are some other organizations in Kentucky that can subside some of that cost for you. So just reach out to me. I'll make sure that my information is up top in the chat, but it'll also be in the follow-up email as well for you to reach out to us, Rob, and we can help you with some of that stuff. Thank you all so much. Tobias, you were wonderful. Gunjan, BreAnn, thank you so much. You are a wealth of knowledge, and we really, really appreciate you today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. As I said previously, the recording will be on our Amplify Louisville YouTube channel. So if there's anything that you want to go back and reference, you'll be able to see it there later on in the week. I wish you all a very, very good week. And thank you so much. We'll try to do this again soon. And if you want to know what we have coming up next, make sure that you go to amplifylouisville.com and join our community. And we will see you all next time. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.